Welcome to the ECA Bay Area Spring 2022 workshop. Earthquake Country Alliance is a statewide partnership of thousands of private, public, and grassroots leaders like yourselves and others you may know that you might encourage to join. We have statewide committees, regional alliances, and support from California's Office of Emergency Services that has funding from FEMA through the NEHRP program that supports ECA's earthquake mitigation activities. And we're headquartered at USC's Southern California Earthquake Center, where myself and also Sharon Sandow, who's on today's call and going to be moderating the chat and other roles are based. You can join ECA at earthquakecountry.org/join and encourage others that you know, please to join. It's free. It just really builds the network of people who are committed to earthquake resilience and safety and preparedness and mitigation and all in California. I mentioned the NEHRP, or National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program, and this is a part of FEMA. They provide support to states. Cal OES applies to that funding and then subawards that funding to us to help manage ECA, especially the education, outreach, and mitigation activities. And there are other agencies involved as well, including those at the bottom of the screen, NIST, NSF, and USGS. We also get some support from those agencies and their support for the Southern California Earthquake Center. And we have a set of statewide activities, including messaging and resources through our websites at both earthquakecountry.org and terremotos.org in Spanish. We support California Tsunami Preparedness Week each March. We have a website, tsunamizone.org/California, where you can go year round to get guidance and information to know your zone, to learn what to do, to plan activities, including that you can also do during in an association with your earthquake drill as part of ShakeOut in October, or whenever you plan to hold your ShakeOut earthquake drill. You can register now. We have more than 3.8 million people already registered. We're hoping to get to 5 million already by the end of this month, and to return to a normal participation level of around 10.5 million or greater this year. Of course, the last couple of years it's been reduced due to the pandemic, but we're hoping as people are either back in person or increasingly making plans for both virtual or hybrid drills, as many did in the last couple of years. We have resources for that as well. You can learn about a lot of our activities on our calendar at earthquakecountry.org/calendar. More we're going to be adding there soon for things coming up. You can participate in one of our committees. If you see this is one of the sectors here listed that you're a part of or know someone, please do direct them there. They can find out more at earthquakecountry.org/committees. And we have outreach bureaus you can be a part of too. If you're a public speaker or like to talk to people out at booths and events, you can join us. You can request a speaker or an information table at our website at earthquakecountry.org/events, a simple form there you can fill out to let us know the details of your event, and then we will kind of matchmake to find the best appropriate speaker or group to come and be at your event. We have groups that work to increase recruitment in ShakeOut and Tsunami Week, especially county and city partners. So let us know if you're interested in that. And also if you're kind of interested in news media, social media, year-round coordination, especially for our major events, we have a media bureau with local leaders in each region. Primary messaging of ECA, just, all of you should know by now if you've been around for a while, but we know we have new people all the time, is the 7 steps to earthquake safety, what to do before, during, and after earthquakes to be prepared to survive and recover. And you can go to earthquakecountry.org/7steps to get all the details on those, and also at terremotos.org/siete pasos in Spanish. We do have a lot of information now, thanks to our support from FEMA, NEHRP, and Cal OES in multiple languages, 15 languages total now, including English. And you can find all of those at earthquakecountry.org/languages. We're really developing this out even further. We're going to have a page for each language, or we already actually do, such as earthquakecountry.org/Chinese or /Korean /Vietnamese, or all the languages that you'll find listed on this main page here. And there's 12 documents total in these different languages. Guidance for what to do to be safe during earthquakes, including for people with disabilities, shakeout guidance, the 7 steps to earthquake safety, how to secure your space, various things like that. Okay, so again, if you've just joined, this is the ECA Bay Area Spring 2022 workshop. Welcome. And for those who just have come on, remember to keep your sound muted, keep your camera on if possible, since this is a regular workshop. We would like to see people. We have a live transcript, which you can kind of adjust the settings for, and you should see American Sign Language interpreters throughout the entire meeting. Please, to interact, do click or into the chat and ask your questions. After each presentation, we will be taking those questions. ECA Bay Area is led by a coordinating committee with 3 co-chairs: Daniel Homsey with the City and County of San Francisco, Ray Bonilla with Meta, formerly Facebook, and Dena Gunning with Central County Fire Department. To be triply make sure that we'll have one of our chairs on our meetings, we have 3 chairs, but this is one of those days where various emergencies have come up with our leaders, personal and professional, that they were not able to be with us. So we do have, as I mentioned, the full coordinating committee, and one of the roles there is the regional workshops coordinator, Jeff Erth from the San Francisco International Airport, who will be stepping in to co-chair today's meeting. As you can see, we have people from around the region and different organizations, quite a diverse group with different leadership roles. And if you're interested in being a part of this group, each group has a committee, or most do. We're looking for more people to be involved with the Events Bureau, again, speakers and presenters and people that go to events, people to be working in each county on behalf of ShakeOut recruitment, just other aspects here. Email is in the chat, sandow@usc.edu, or as listed here, Bay Area Earthquake Country.org. Sharon will get it either way. So for today's agenda, we've just gone over that welcome, and thanks for those who are with us today, and reviewed the coordinating committee. I'm going to turn it over to our next, to Jeff to introduce our speakers, but you can see the agenda coming up. So we have an initial longer presentation, and then a short for Monica Stoffel, then a short Quakes Break. We're going to hear from our Mini Award recipients from this year, what we call lightning talks. Another short presentation from Ann Rosinski at FEMA, and then we'll end with open discussion and networking. And went back for. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you for get things going.
Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Mark. We are really glad to see you here today. I am Jeff Erth with Emergency Management at San Francisco International Airport. Yes, filling in for Daniel and Ray and Dena. We hope to have them at a future workshop, but again, we're so grateful to you to join us. First, I want to introduce on our agenda, as you saw here just a minute ago from Mark, Monica Stoffel. I've known Monica for a number of years. She and her organization are a wealth of information on a number of things having to do with resilience. She'll be presenting a talk to us on enhancing our operational resilience by exercising aspects of an earthquake scenario. And what more appropriate will this be for us? So thank you so much, Monica, for joining us, taking some time of your busy day to come to our workshop. I know you've been to SFO before, and we might invite you to come back some point or join other groups. But again, we'll turn it over to you, Monica, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for that introduction, Jeff. And also thank you to all of the people who are on today's call to take the time out of your busy schedule to focus on this discussion about preparedness, about resilience to earthquakes. We live in earthquake country. The focus of my presentation today is really about using an earthquake scenario to enhance your everyday operational resilience. And if we go to the next slide. So there's a lot of different definitions about operational resilience. But regardless of which one you use, at its core, it's about continuing to function in an ever-changing environment for your organization. The world we live in is constantly fluid. That suppliers change, weather patterns change, the day-to-day customers come and go. There's always change. And operational resilience is about the everyday resilience as much as it is about the resilience to the big catastrophic events. And that really is part of the focus of today. If we go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. So disruptions come from everywhere. As I mentioned with the everyday, think back to 2018. If you were asked to provide a list of reasons we would be without power for multiple days, probably very few people would have said utility companies shutting off power even though there is no infrastructure damage. Public safety power shutoffs, we now know them well. When you had talked about supply chains, very few people probably would have said, oh, we need to think about toilet paper because that one might run out. So disruptions can come from unexpected places, from all different angles. And if we go to the next slide, exercises are the space where we get to explore, where we get to grow, where we get to gain confidence and abilities. They are our playground. And just like a playground is supposed to be a safe environment for children to get their feet underneath them, to learn coordination and movement, exercises are that safe place for organizations and team members and even multi-agencies to come together to learn, to practice, to explore, to think about those eventualities, those possibilities of what might happen and how can we improve operational resilience to that. Next slide. Earthquakes are an amazing tool for this. And one of the reasons is an earthquake scenario touches pretty much everything. All aspects of your operations, aspects of society, it covers that gamut. Next slide. It touches people. It's your employees, your customers, your suppliers. It's your buildings and your assets. It's the transportation systems. It's utilities and communications, supply chains. It has regulatory implications and works with insurance. There's public health aspects. There's ongoing aspects to it, such as after slip and aftershocks. And there's concurrent hazards of public health and fires after earthquake. All of these things come together. And it's also a scenario that plays with the emotional and psychological impacts of disaster. Additionally, you don't have to look at it just from that response of event happens, now what do we do? You can exercise preparedness. You can exercise response, recovery, mitigation, so you can play with the time dynamics of an earthquake scenario, giving you a multitude of possibilities to exercise. Next slide. And even more, here in the Bay Area, there is an entire scenario already designed for you that has everything in terms of the movement of the ground, the shaking, the liquefaction areas. What does that mean for our buildings? How many people might be stuck in elevators? What are the damages to roads and bridges? And what are the societal impacts? That scenario is already built for you that you can tap into. Next slide. Often we approach exercises, especially with something as complex in some ways as an earthquake, we try and bring that complexity into exercises. But that's not an inherent component of exercises, caveat being if there's regulatory requirements of how an exercise needs to run. You have creativity that you can do with your exercise. If we go to the next slide, start simple. Think about a hobby that you're doing, somebody who's learning to play a sport, somebody who's playing a musical instrument. They don't jump in and try and play the most difficult piece or try and do competition right off the bat. You do building blocks, you learn the foundational elements. And just like that with your exercises, you don't need to cover all aspects of an earthquake to begin with. You can start small. You can start with just a little piece. Next slide. For example, fires after earthquakes. In the scenario, there's information on what might happen with fires after an earthquake. There's also the visuals that you can reference and utilize. And then you can take this and go down even further. Next slide. Identify just a single issue and start there. How do we reduce the chances of fire ignitions spreading into and through our facilities? Just focus on that piece of it instead of trying to cover everything. And with time, you can build and layer these. Next. So as you build your exercise, it doesn't have to be a large, in-person, everybody actively doing thing. That's one type of exercise. There's value in that. And there's also value in the exercises that are bringing a small group of people together around that table to have a discussion exercise, to dialogue through. And you can do that using this fires after earthquakes kind of idea and concept and question by delving in on some more specific aspects. Okay, look around. How easy is it for fire to spread through your facility? What mitigation have you already done? What does our fire alarm do if we lose power? Are we dependent on communication? And you start breaking these pieces down and dialoguing it through. You might not have the answers to the questions that are posed, but the identification that you don't have an answer can be as valuable as having an answer because it prompts you to dig further, to look deeper, to explore some more of what does that mean? And the questions can be as valuable as the answer. Next slide. So think of exercising as practicing. And in order to improve, we have to practice. So I gave one example of how to use kind of that fire after earthquake scenario or aspect of the larger earthquake scenario to do a very basic tabletop exercise. If you have this kind of broader concept, okay, we're going to touch on fires after earthquake, narrow it down to a specific issue, your questions that you're talking through. But there's other ways that you can also exercise. You can start your staff meetings with a scenario question. One of those discussion questions, take the first 5 minutes of every staff meeting and talk about a question. Build behavior patterns about thinking on resilience. Hold scavenger hunts. Challenge employees to identify hazards in the workplace so that they can be fixed, to brainstorm what might happen, and engage in what if. That early on I mentioned with PSPS and the toilet paper shortage, those are probably scenarios and things that people would never have thought of unless they were truly engaging in what if. Because it is in that arena of imagination, in that arena of just exploring, that we identify these possibilities that we might not think of in our standard everyday. And yet it is these exercises, these dialogues that build our paths, that build the capacity, the capability to strengthen our everyday resilience. And it is by improving and making stronger how we are in the everyday that's going to be a key player in how we respond to the catastrophic events, because those are the behavior patterns we're familiar with. Those are what we're going to fall back to. And so if we can become stronger and healthier there, we're so much better off for when those catastrophic events happen. And so you can use this catastrophic event and break it down into something more manageable, less intimidating, that also helps you increase resilience for your everyday. Next slide. There's also a tool and resource being created for you that recognizing the value and the power of the Haywired earthquake scenario and the work that's been put into that. There's a team that has been working to develop an exercise toolkit to help drive and facilitate discussion-based exercises around various non-standard aspects of an earthquake scenario, such as the fires after earthquake scenario that I just talked about, to talk about mailroom operations, to talk about employee commute, mental health and well-being, so these different aspects. And there's also facilitator guides that are being developed to help make it even easier for you to hold discussion-based exercises around this and to motivate you to do some more practicing and to do some more exercising. Next slide. Slow transition. So that was kind of an overview of how to utilize an earthquake scenario, this catastrophic event that is big and complex and has all sorts of facets, and make it something that's less intimidating, that you can use and you can gain value from, and to hopefully spark some ideas that you can take back to your employees to dialogue through and to start that exercising, to improve the exercising that you already are doing, and to take it a step further. And as you build those foundations, you can start layering them together and adding more and more elements to become more dynamic in your exercises. It's not that they always have to be these very simple, basic questions, but start out with the simple building blocks and build from there. My contact information is here on the screen. Feel free to reach out. I'll be staying on the call for probably about another 15 minutes or so, and then I do need to move on to something else. But feel free to reach out, and I'll also monitor the chat while I'm still on the call. Are there any questions for me right now?
Thank you, Monica. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate highlighting the Haywired scenarios, and I like the idea of just creativity. Just use some creativity there to see how you can use exercises in planning and testing your plans for sure. Thank you so much for that. Well, now we're going to move over to Dr. Josie Nevitt on the Quakes Break. Dr. Nevitt is a research geologist for the USGS, and she will present Quakes Break, updating us on earthquakes in the Bay Area since our last online workshop. I know we're all eager to know the latest on what's happening with earthquakes.
Actually, before we jump into Dr. Nevitt, sorry to interrupt, Jeff. We just got a question in the chat from John. Monica, where can we find the Haywired resources?
I am putting the link into the chat to make it easy for everybody to get to.
Thank you. And Lars Eric also asked, I am guessing that the Haywired toolkit will be or is available at USGS and or Earthquake Country Alliance.
So the toolkit is still under development, but the Haywired scenario is available on the USGS website. And that's the link I'll be adding. And the toolkit will be available on the Earthquake Country Alliance website. And we'll make sure, I think, Mark, to get that out to everybody once it's ready.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Jeff, back to you.
Not a problem. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you again, Monica. So Dr. Nevitt, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us and taking time from a busy day.
All right, thanks for having me. It was fun to put together this Quakes Break. So next slide, please. So we'll dive in using the USGS Earthquake Map page. Since your last meeting on February 16th, there have been 36 earthquakes with a magnitude greater than 6.0 worldwide. Most of these occurred far from people and or deep in the earth, and none occurred in North America. 2 were greater than a magnitude 7, and we'll briefly discuss the magnitude 7.3 event that happened in Japan. Next slide, please. So this earthquake occurred on March 16th, and within the rupture area of the 2011 magnitude 9.1 Tohoku earthquake. The inset map in the upper right is from the USGS event page and shows very strong intensity shaking in the Fukushima prefecture. The earthquake was preceded by a magnitude 6.4 foreshock. It caused 3 casualties, over 225 injuries, damaged 350 buildings and a bridge. It caused massive power outages, derailed a bullet train, and it also triggered a tsunami warning, but fortunately the tsunami reached only 30 inches in maximum height. There was significant concern about the Fukushima nuclear power plants, but they were not at least significantly affected by this event. Next slide, please. So zooming into Northern California, there were 43 earthquakes with a magnitude greater than 3.0 and 3 with a magnitude greater than 4. Several appeared to be aftershocks of other recent large magnitude earthquakes, including Ridgecrest, Antelope Valley, and Petrolia. Next slide, please. You can use the earthquake maps page to search for specific products. So for example, you can search for earthquakes that generated shake alert messages. And there were 6 of them over the time period since your last meeting. So if you're interested in assessing shake alert performance, you can look at these summary reports that are available. For example, this one for the 4.1 magnitude earthquake near Rio Del. So in this case, you can see in the upper left figure, the initial location, which is the black circle, was very close to what eventually became the official ANSS location for this event, which is the yellow star. And the initial and final magnitude estimates were also quite similar. Because none of these events exceeded magnitude 5, there were no wireless emergency alerts issued during this time period. Next slide, please. So focusing on the Bay Area, this was, knock on wood, a relatively quiescent period. And in the next few slides, I'll briefly review these 3 events that were the most widely felt, and I'll move from north to south. So next slide, please.
No.
So on March 3rd, a magnitude 3.8 earthquake occurred very shallowly within a kilometer of Earth's surface in the geysers. So this map on the left shows the "Did you feel it" responses available on the event page. And it shows weak to light shaking that was reported by 33 people. The geysers is the largest geothermal field in the world. And the practice of injecting fluid and extracting steam can induce earthquakes by a variety of mechanisms that's shown in the bottom right figure. As a result of this activity, low magnitude earthquakes are quite common in the geysers area. Next slide, please. So moving south on March 19th, a magnitude 3.6 earthquake occurred near Corralitos. There were 741 "Did you feel it" responses, reporting weak to light shaking from Monterey to Vallejo. This earthquake occurred within the rupture area of the 1989 magnitude 6.9 Loma Prieta earthquake, which is within the Santa Cruz Mountains restraining bend of the San Andreas Fault. So you can see in the Google Earth imagery to the right that the San Andreas Fault in red makes a gentle bend to the left in this area, and that results in greater compression across the fault there. So these beach ball diagrams are the focal mechanism solutions for the two events, and these are also available on the event pages. And we can use these to try to better understand the orientation of the fault planes on which these events are occurring. And so both of these suggest that the faults were dipping and that there was oblique slip during these events. And that's consistent with what we expect in a restraining bend, and also with the uplift of the Santa Cruz Mountains over geologic time. So next slide, please. Oh, I think you skipped one. Yeah. So moving a little further south on March 13th, there's a magnitude 4.1 earthquake at Pinnacles, again, resulting in weak to light shaking that was felt as far north as Vacaville. The focal mechanism indicates strike slip motion on a vertical fault. On the right is, again, Google Earth imagery, and it includes the Quaternary Fault Database, which you can access at that URL in the lower right. The Pinnacles earthquake occurred near the junction of the San Andreas and Calaveras faults, and also where the San Andreas transitions from locked behavior in the north to the creeping section to the south. And so the creeping section is continuously or episodically slipping, and this loads the peripheries and leads to kind of frequent moderate magnitude earthquakes at Pinnacles. So this magnitude 4.1 is pretty typical of Pinnacles. Also shown on this map are the locations of active USGS creep meters. Those are the little thumbtacks. And these are measuring creep at Earth's surface along both the Haywired and San Andreas faults. And so the epicenter for this Pinnacles event plots directly on top of one of these creep meters. So I thought it might be of interest to some of you to understand how during an earthquake like this, you might see its effects as creep at Earth's surface. And this could have impacts potentially on fault crossing infrastructure. So next slide, please. Oops, back one, thanks. So if you are interested in the creep meter data, you can access it at the Crustal Deformation Monitoring website shown here. You go to that fault creep, borehole strain, and tilt meter link, and then you can either plot the data on the website itself, or you can download it to plot it yourself, which is what I did. So next slide, please. So this is what it looks like for that Pinnacles event, where this plot is showing the fault parallel creep as the blue curve versus time in 2022. And so you can see at days about 45 and 95, there are two kind of bigger creep events. But if you look just at that Pinnacles time period on March 13th, you can see that the creep meter did have a small response to that earthquake. And so we don't fully understand how earthquakes at depth are related to creep at the surface, but it's always interesting to check when there are earthquakes on the Haywired or San Andreas fault, that creeping section kind of boundaries, to see whether it did generate creep at the surface. So that concludes the Quakes break, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Nevitt?
Not seeing any questions in the chat. If anybody has any questions, please share them in the chat for Dr. Nevitt.
I admire you, Doctor. This is incredibly interesting. I wish we had time to delve in deeper. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I will turn it over now to Sharon Sandow, the Deputy Director of Earthquake Country Alliance, who is in charge of the Mini Award program. And Sharon, thank you so much for joining us and taking care of this part. It's all yours.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to introduce our mini award recipients who will present their projects. Next slide, please. The mini award program, for those of you who have or have not heard of it, involve purchases of packages focused on mitigation and education products. The packages are $500 to $1,000. And you must be an ECA member. I'll put in the chat how to join ECA if you have not already joined ECA. But we have predefined packages available, and it allows you the opportunity to secure your space or secure an office that you may work in, a long-term care facility, and so forth. So it really does help move the needle on behavioral improvements, including earthquake mitigation and education activities. Our next mini award cycle will take place in fall 2022. And again, I encourage you to join ECA because you'll have an opportunity to learn more about this and to apply for these packages. So today we're going to hear some presentations. Our first presentation will be Sandra Ferpo from San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department, Cert.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today, and of course for your support. Are you going to be showing my slideshow, or do I do it? Thank you very much. There it is. So there we are, San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department CERT, or Community Emergency Response Team. We cover the cities of Belmont, Foster City, and San Mateo here in Northern California. We look at CERT as a force multiplier for our fire department and professional first responders. They are, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Community Emergency Response Team, this is a national program that follows curriculum set up by FEMA. There are over 2,700 CERT programs throughout the country, and CERT exists in every state and includes international locations. I have met CERT teams from as far away as Chile and Japan. So our jurisdiction here in the three cities of Belmont, Foster City, and San Mateo covers a population roughly of about 180,000 people. We have about 790 CERT members, but have trained well over 3,000 residents in our three cities since the program came to our area in 1994. Next slide, please. So the mini award that we applied for is called Map Your Neighborhood, and it had two main goals for us, for our program, and that was for our CERTs to go back out into the neighborhoods after having been a little, closed off during the pandemic, and to start looking at their neighborhood in a more CERT-like or preparedness-like perspective. And so therefore, walk your neighborhood and identify assets as well as hazards that would be important to know in an emergency such as an earthquake. The second is to make CERT more visible to our community, getting back out there, as I said, after the pandemic, and making sure that residents were aware not only of the CERT program, but of resources available to them to help them in their earthquake and general preparedness. The folks who benefited, of course, were our own CERTs and our residents that they came into contact with throughout our three cities. So we undertook this project during the whole month of April. We had CERTs going out into their neighborhoods in the three cities. Our CERT members were very identifiable. They were very high visibility vests and caps usually, or something that indicates that they are CERT members. They were given some, obviously the workbook, which if you go to the next slide, I think we'll be showing. There we go. So they had workbooks and flyers with upcoming preparedness events and things that people could take part in, as these were for use when they ran into folks out in their during their walks in their Map Your Neighborhood project. Next slide, please. So here are you'll be seeing some photos, but the workbooks, and there's Steve, one of our Cert volunteers, who ran into a neighbor who was out walking as well. And so we had some, like I said, flyers to hand out, as well as the workbook. And the goal with the workbook, of course, was for each of the Certs who participated to then have their own workbook filled out, which mapped their neighborhood and identified hazards and assets and different things. And this becomes now a resource for them personally in their go bag or their Cert bag for things that they felt were important to note in their own neighborhood. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights that were reported back to me from the Certs who were out there where they ran into other Cert trained residents who maybe hadn't been active for the last several years. And so that sort of inspired them to reach out and get back activated within our Cert program. And then, of course, talking with residents about the different things that are available, different resources available to them in our area, upcoming events and classes and such. And the Certs themselves reported that they felt really good to get back out there and being able to sort of look at their neighborhoods with a more preparedness eye. Next slide, please. So we did go out through 16 neighborhoods, in 3 cities. We spoke in person to 178 residents about preparedness, earthquake preparedness, resources, and Cert, of course, and 56 of our Cert volunteers participated. As I said, they went out in high visibility gear. They went out in 2 groups of 2 or 3. They even ran into some natural wildlife in their outings. So next slide, please. Here are a couple more of our folks. I think one of the Certs there was intrigued by that bus that's for sale and was hoping that maybe we'd pick it up for our Cert program. But we'll have to wait for another time for something like that. Next slide, please. So we were very grateful for the Earthquake Country Alliance for offering this program. As Monica mentioned earlier in her presentation, this sort of was our scavenger hunt for hazards and assets. Things like, knowing where your schools are located, skilled nursing facilities, perhaps water tanks, high power lines, things like that are hazards and assets in your neighborhood, just to be more aware of them. Maybe there'll be neighbors who need maybe extra assistance in an evacuation situation, or resources like the mom and pop market, or a school, or a hardware store. So just being more aware of those things, I think, was a great realization and inspiration to our Cert members, as well as to the neighbors that they ran into.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Earthquake Country Alliance.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That was awesome. I want to introduce from United Policyholders, Emily Rogan.
Hi. All right. Thank you guys so much for having me. I just want to say thank you so much for our mini grant. For those of you who don't know that much about United Policyholders, the first thing I want to say is we are a nonprofit organization. We don't take any money from insurance companies, and we don't sell insurance. But we do help people before and after disasters with their insurance issues. Afterwards, the bulk of our work is done after disasters, helping people navigate the insurance claim process, getting the money they need to rebuild. And those problems that we see after disasters come into 2 different categories. We see coverage problems and we see claim problems. And it's the coverage problems that are the hardest to solve after the fact. And that's why we created a preparedness program. And this mini grant was really helpful for us because it was allowed us to print materials for our preparedness program to pass out. And then we also have an advocacy program, which is a little smaller, but we weigh in on how to, for the policyholder side. So around earthquake insurance, it's what really makes sense for the people to really help get that uptake in insurance. So if you go to the next slide, we'll tell you a little bit about what we were able to do. We received a $500 grant to print color copies of a recent flyer that we created that was called Earthquakes Can Drain Your Bank Account. We participated with FEMA Region 9 to create this flyer. And it's the first of a few different layers that we'll be creating for FEMA to have on their website about earthquake insurance. Earthquake insurance still, especially in California, there's a very, it's very difficult because only about 10-15% around there of homeowners have earthquake insurance. And we all know that when the big one hits, that if you don't have insurance and there's damage to your property, most of the time, except I did screenshot from the previous presenter of what the anticipation of fires after earthquakes will be in that scenario. I thought that was really interesting. But if it's just earthquake damage, then your homeowner's insurance does not cover that damage. And that also means that your homeowner's insurance does not cover any loss of use coverage, which is paying for a new place to live while you're repairing your old place. But earthquake insurance does cover that gap. Part of our conversation around earthquake insurance is always, well, what would you do if you did not have that coverage? Where would you stay? Would you be able to afford your mortgage still and that? How would you pay for repairs? So it's part of our preparedness conversation. Thank you, Sharon. So we were able to print with $500. We were able to print this wonderful handout with we got 1,000 flyers distributed, and we were able to, in the last couple of months, give them out at 13 events in 8 different counties. So on the left, you can see my colleague Eva passing out the flyer. It goes along with our other preparedness messages. And this was the handout. As you can see, it looks a lot better than color than it would have if we were able to do it on our nonprofit budget of black and white on 70% recycled paper, because that's the cheapest. So if you go to the next slide, I can show you where we were able to distribute it. And I made a little, back one, please. Made a little map about where we have been in the last couple of months, with a caveat being that one of them will be passed out this month as well, or in June. So it's all packaged up, it's ready to go. But this is where we were able to pass them out. Earthquakes affect all of California. A lot of these communities were preparing for wildfire. And, when they're talking about this, they're heightened when they're talking about the communities will pull together preparedness fairs around that. And we brought earthquake information to these places. And, we're always happy to push that out. And we just wanted to say a really, really big thank you for giving us this mini grant. If you go to the next slide, you can see that we also have a lot of information on our website around earthquake insurance. You can go to our Get Prepared. It's the little blue top hand navigation that is our buying tips library, and you can hit earthquake insurance, and we have tons of resources for making that decision. There's no one way for everybody. And we just thank you so much for being able to give us this grant and to make sure that our materials, and the flyer is on that page. I can stick it right into the link as well. And Janet, thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. That's great. Unfortunately, our recipient from Inverness was not able to join us today. So I will just present from the Inverness Disaster Council. You can read along where Inverness is located. Their purpose of this program was to educate the community to care for itself and to assist firefighters and first responders. The Inverness Disaster Council was created in 1982, and they are organized under the direction of the Fire Department and Marin County Fire. The primary audience for this mini award is the Inverness volunteer firefighters and the community. You can see the website address, and the contact name is the name of the fire chief, and the disaster council, which is Connie Morris. They received a Secure Your Workplace $500 mini award package, and their goal was to secure the current firehouse and office, which is their incident command center during an earthquake. So it needed some mitigation, and this project was to do that mitigation. The other goal of this was the community outreach, providing instructions for installation of the earthquake safety materials. You can see the items that were received, various strapping materials. The beneficiaries are, of course, the community, who will have a safe fire department and safe firefighters, and the volunteer firefighters themselves. And the evaluation plan was regular check-ins with me and with the fire chief. The highlights so far have been having the collaborative work of the firefighters and the community working together. They did learn how easy it is to install the Quake Hold products, which I was very happy to hear. And this will be an ongoing project. Preparedness and mitigation certainly is not a one-time thing, and it's something that you have to continue and work on to ensure that your space is safe. Here are some photos from the installations that they did at the fire department. You can see where they've strapped the cabinets and various other materials. And you can see the work being done. And these photos show good use of the materials. And now I'd like to introduce representing Eden INR and 211 Alameda County. I'd like to introduce Lars Eric Ho.
Great, and a quick sound check.
Yep, you're good.
Great, it's always like to check because technology is not always my friend. So my name is Lars Eric Ho. First name is Lars Eric. It's kind of like Joe Bob, but Swedish. And I am with Eden Information and Referral, which has been connecting people to resources since 1976. We are the 211 service provider for Alameda County. So, you know, we're very important to Alameda County, just like 211s across the state of California are important to California, and 211s nationally important to everywhere in the United States. So you can see our nice motto there. It's basically envisioning a community that, I mean, basically knowledge is power. That's really what it's all about, right? So that's the most important thing. Next slide, please. So basically, the name of this project is Working from Home Safely. We actually were the recipient, the happy and lucky recipients of a workplace grant a couple of years ago. And I definitely had fun doing that for our work location. And in fact, well, actually, I'll get to the point next, but it was nice because while we had some stuff, it was quite dated and really definitely needed some upgrading. After COVID happened, we realized that a lot of our hardworking community resource specialists we're not benefiting from that. We're working almost entirely remotely right now. So the idea was to basically establish the same levels of safety for currently working from home employees. And this is also going to be important because we're going to continue this. We're going to continue working in a hybrid fashion. So what we got was we asked for, and what we were kindly given were these wonderful residential home fastening starter kits. Although I just basically refer to them as earthquake safety home kits. And these were really, really well received. It's basically helping our staff, mostly our community resource specialists, the folks who actually take the calls, but also staff. And this by sort of like a domino effect helps everyone who contacts 211 for help, whether it's the everyday occurring disaster of homelessness, not having food, not being able to find childcare, to our actual and actual disasters like earthquakes, fires, floods, or zombie apocalypse. So I have a spreadsheet where I'm tracking all this stuff. I'm in the process of labeling the kits so that we'll know. Next slide, please. Part of my plan was to actually deliver these for people who couldn't come to the office to pick them up because they're not coming to the office that frequently. Sadly, life happens and I had car trouble, and being able to be a delivery person interfered with that. So that kind of put me back a little further than I intended. I thought I was going to be at least halfway by now. Despite that, we're about a third of the way through because people do come into the office periodically. I also learned, you're going to see this in a moment, that some of the staff are camera shy because I definitely wanted to photograph this because here's the thing. I photographed all the installs I did for the office. I'm asking people to give me photographs of not just picking the kits up, but actually using them because I'm going to turn this into training curriculum. Not long after the last grant, I actually was doing trainings on how to make yourself safe. And I actually have a favorite prop where I show folks how good the earthquake putty is, because look at this, my super valuable glass isn't going anywhere. So I have a whole thing set up. I have a whole slide deck and thing where I can present on that. I'm going to be doing the same for here. This is also great because I actually had a staff member who's from another country who had never heard of ShakeOut, never heard about the hardware. So from the slides you can see here, there she is posing by one of our shirts. Here are some people happily posing with thumbs up with the kits. That's mostly on the left side. On the right-hand side are people doing some actual installs. So one staff member was too shy to show herself. So she proposed her kit in front of the object she's going to secure. Notice something about the guys. What's the first thing a guy wants to secure? Yes, the TV. Make sure the TV is safe in an earthquake. Absolutely. Hey, what can I say? And then there's a real super cute young one there in the middle who's like, okay, so you can never be too young to learn about earthquake safety, right? Final slide. So this is my contact information that's going to be coming up, just in case anybody has any questions about anything that I do or anything about this. But besides being a great opportunity for me to show off the ShakeOut shirt and talk about ShakeOut and talk a little bit about hardware and how easy it is to install, I'm going to be continuing to document this and follow up until I find that people have done the full range of installs. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Lars Eric. I now want to introduce on behalf of MPC Ready, I'd like to introduce Lynn Bramlett.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you everyone for being here today. So I am a founding member and the director of MPC Ready, which is focused on the city of Menlo Park and the unincorporated county area as part of Menlo Park. There are actually 3 islands right in the middle of Menlo Park, 3 county islands. And our mission, we're a neighborhood level disaster preparedness organization. And our mission is to work collaboratively to help build disaster prepared and climate change ready neighborhoods through advocacy, education and training, resources, organization, and support. So there you have my contact information. Feel free to reach out. If we could have the next slide, that would be great. So we applied for something we called the Marcusson Drive Earthquake Proofing Barn Raising Pilot. And Marcusson Drive in Menlo Park, so you see it, right there. They're in the process of having a 7-month training every month leading up to a neighborhood level drill. And we plan to replicate that elsewhere. So this is one of our neighborhoods that we are getting organized. So it's neighborhood by neighborhood, personal preparedness, household, the neighbors, you work with the neighbors. So this particular street has duplexes. And because of the parallel training, it just seemed perfect to offer as an extra, incentive, if you will, these earthquake proofing kits. And so one of the neighborhood coordinators, we talked about who would be the beneficiary, et cetera. We started with those in the training or those they wanted to get more involved in that. And so she prepared a flyer and she was the contact to them. So she's already known and trusted. They had a little kit with the supplies. She sent it to me. I didn't include it. And, then they got to work. And if we can have the next slide, please. I want to be mindful of your time limit too. So our first thought was the idea was the social event. Everyone meets around 10 o'clock. It's social, food, etc. And then you kind of go out and, 2 to 3 people in a team into a house. But we learned that idea didn't work so well. It was kind of modeled on, and the homesteaders got together to raise a barn, but everyone knew how to raise a barn, or there was plenty tasks across the generational spectrum. But what we found was you need a professional to strap a TV or, heavy furniture. Most people don't know how to do that. So we did some troubleshooting and conveniently, a neighbor moved in who happened to be a handyman. So he was tapped as, part of the package. And so we learned because of schedules, it didn't necessarily work for everyone to, meet and then do the work. We do want to have a follow-on kind of a social. We do have some work still to do with the heavier material. And the handyman, unfortunately, he went to another state for a few months to help his family work in a home. So I'm going to reach out to our local Ace hardware store. And then there's another new hardware store in Palo Alto, which is adjacent to us, but the owner lives in Menlo Park, to see if we couldn't get a handyman and get some kind of discount on supplies and then roll it out more broadly. So that is our goal, have kind of a, in the box, if you will, activity that other groups could do. So here are some pictures. You see the Hummel figurines. If we could have the last slide, that would be great. Okay, so one of the highlights is, so this street is tightly knit. There's a neighborhood chart. People know each other. And one of the families was homeschooling their daughters. So to get the neighbor interested, it was the neighborhood coordinator pitched it as, well, this would be a great homeschool project. You could then go to the exploratorium, the earthquake exhibit. And so this daughter who is kind of has some special needs, if you will, it totally was thrilling to her to get hands-on and use the earthquake museum putty where the things aren't falling over. So anyway, it was very successful. I want to thank thank you that we got this award, and we certainly will be applying for more. And Phil, reach out, please, if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That's great. The Oakland Fire Safe Council is next, and the presentation will be made by Jen Grimm.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much, ECA, for this program, and thank you for the award. And love all the inspiring projects that everybody's presented so far. So I'm here on behalf of the Oakland Fire Safe Council. We are a grassroots, community-based nonprofit, and we mostly do, the Fire Safe Council deals with wildfires, but we do have a disaster preparedness program, and it is called the Oakland Community Preparedness and Response. And so that is what we applied the award for. And next slide. And so here's the Oakland Community Preparedness and Response Program. We do a lot of outreach and workshops. And so we were focusing on our outreach tabling that is now gearing up, ramping up now that we can be in public together a little bit more. And so we requested the children's activity books and storybooks that are called the Rocket Rules Earthquake Safety Adventure, and the coloring books that accompany them, and both in Spanish and in English. We have a lot of printed resources for adults, but we don't have anything for kids. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to get younger people engaged and plant the seed about disaster preparedness, focusing around earthquakes. And we were dealing with residents of Oakland and anybody visiting the particular events that we were tabling at. And so here's an example of a tabling that we did at a recent community neighborhood gathering. We were also at a recent Earth Day event and a recent Firefighters Appreciation Day. And we were also able to give a stack of the books to our Oakland's Emergency Services Management Division so that their Cert teams could pass them out to any upcoming appearances throughout the city. And we found that having these materials geared towards children was a great way to invite families over to the booth and a way to engage them to come on over and take a look at what we have. And kids are always curious and always wanting something that they can use. So that was good. But the unknown part is that what really happens once they get the books, when they take them home, what kind of engagement, what kind of learning is happening. So we don't know that part. And then also, do parents take the time to talk to their kids or go over the content of the book, or the activities with the children? So maybe some guided activities at libraries might be a good way to make sure that some of the content is actually absorbed, as opposed to just being a coloring book. So next slide. And here's just a couple more pictures of another tabling event during Earth Day at a school in Oakland, and then a young user of the book there in the stroller. And that is it. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to contact us. We are here to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. That's fantastic. We have one final mini award project in the Bay Area. Unfortunately, they were unable to join us today. That is the Young Adult Institute. They received a long-term care facility package. The Young Adult Institute is, their mission is focused on children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They offer various services involving education, behavioral support, socialization, and other wraparound services. So we will be hearing from them another time. If you have any questions about the mini awards or anything related to ECA, you can email us at info@earthquakecountry.org, or you can email me at sandow@usc.edu. I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Terrific. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. Great projects, and great and satisfying to see all of the different areas and groups and neighborhoods and organizations that are participating in this. So thank you. Keep that up. I'd like to now introduce Ann Rosinski from FEMA Region 9. She is an earthquake program manager and will present our mitigation moment. Welcome, Ann.
Super, thank you. It's been a while, and back when I first started with FEMA again, back in 2019, I hosted an Earthquake Country Alliance meeting in person at our offices. So hopefully sometime in the near future, we'll get to do that again. But this is just as good. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about some of the funding opportunities. So we've just heard about these terrific mini awards, and I think they're really inspiring. We all know that there's not nearly enough funding that's dedicated on an annual basis to earthquake mitigation, but you all are showing that even these smaller efforts, there's a lot that we can accomplish. So when people tell me that we don't get enough money and we can't do anything, you prove them wrong. You show that there's a lot that can be done. So next slide. So there's a couple of big funding opportunities. We've heard about NEHRP, the National Earthquake Hazard Reduction Program, which helps fund the Earthquake Country Alliance and some of the projects that we've seen today. But there are some other larger pots of money. They're not specifically dedicated to earthquake, but earthquake is certainly eligible for that. So there's the new one is the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC. And there's two paths to funding for that one. One is nationally competitive, where there's a big pot of money and it's pre-disaster mitigation funding. And you apply for that, and you're competing against other projects nationwide, and there's some great projects. The states and tribes are the applicants, and the cities, counties, and local jurisdictions would be the sub-applicants. Some of the projects you can also apply for. So it's not just a structural mitigation. The Bric Grants and a lot of the FEMA funding covers a lot of the pre-mitigation planning activities, like the outreach activities, like doing inventories and scoping projects. So there's a lot, and those projects, the great thing about those is those applications don't require benefit cost analysis. So there's an easier path to funding. And then BRIC also gives each state their own pot of money that they can decide how to distribute as well. So that's the general one. And then there's also the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And these are state the states set priorities and through their hazard mitigation, their state plan, and they are post-disaster. So whenever there is a large event, the states will get a pot of money that they can use. And we see certainly, disasters, climate-based like fire and flood. There's typically states like California, unfortunately, deal with these on an annual basis. So there's typically an annual large pot of money available. But the funding does not have to be spent just on that peril where they got the funding. So the state, if they get a large amount of funding for fire, they can also choose to use some of that money on earthquake as well. So it's important to check with the state to see what their priorities are for each opportunity. For the Bric Grants, the other thing to point out is that the state is the applicant, and then the sub-applicants would be the local jurisdictions. So if you're a nonprofit or say a critical infrastructure operator, you're not eligible to directly apply for a BRIC project, BRIC funding. But if you work with a local jurisdiction and you coordinate with them and they can include your project as a priority in their local plan, then they can apply for the project and they can be the manager. So and the great thing about that though is too that it brings everybody together to collaborate. We really need local participation. And so building stakeholder buy-in, that's really important for these types of projects. So next slide.
And this is Mark Benthien. Just a quick note, we are hearing some sound coming through in your environment.
Sorry. Okay.
So
sorry. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. So in terms of types of projects, for FEMA seismic, we do fund seismic retrofits. So things like wall and roof and foundation retrofits, seismic bracings like flexible pipe and sprinkler connections, tie downs. So non-structural type of mitigation and things like gas and water shutoff valves. And next slide. And then also FEMA supports earthquake early warning. Our funding for those types of projects is limited to what we call the backbone elements. So the seismic and geodetic networks, the computing and telemetry. But that supports then projects like the earthquake early warning that the state has. And in terms of the earthquake early warning, we also fund the downstream action. So in the earlier slide, you saw the shutoff valves and things like that. So we can fund those types of activities as well. So just to give you, that's my little mitigation minute or two, just to let you know that there is funding out there for some of these larger projects. We're happy to help you and work with you and your local community. If you have any questions about any of these projects, just let me know.
Very good. Thank you so much. And for this great information, those great resources. And hopefully we'll get some people taking advantage of those for sure. Okay, at this time, I want to turn it back either to Sharon or Mark for any discussion points, anything that anyone has. I believe this is a good time to ask questions. Mark or Sharon?
thanks, Jeff. And yeah, does anybody have any questions for Ann or about those programs, or has anybody applied for and maybe received that support that they want to share their story of that? Kind of leave that for the chat or someone to speak up. And, but also, and I know that FEMA, you can track down through the links and such, does offer webinars and all sorts of guidance for how to, really hold people's hands as they go through these processes. Is that kind of a year round, or is it like, what's the right timing for applying for these?
Oh, that's a great question. For California, they have the BRIC application period opens typically in September. That's the FEMA application period. And then the states need to get their applications into FEMA in January. So, but typically what happens is the states, because they have a lot of projects that come in and they have to triage those and review those and decide which ones are eligible. The state deadline, if you're a subgrantee and applying to the state, their application is usually in the fall, like I think around October, November, because they need time to go through it as well. So it's going to be different for each state and territory, but this call is primarily California folks. So I would highly encourage you. I think some of our Cal OES partners are on the call today, and they can give you a little bit more information about that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ann. Okay, so now is the time of the meeting. We have a few minutes left in the main meeting, and then we'll even open it up just for general discussion. But based on today's, I'll turn my camera on. Based on the presentations today, is there anyone that has had any activity that you've been inspired to do? Have you thought about a mini award project that you might want to take on and develop to submit in the fall? Has your organization done an exercise or looking at what you might do? Just generally, what can we provide you? What questions do you have, related to today's workshop? And also, if you have any announcements of activities coming up that you would like to share with everyone, that's also appropriate. You can, at this point, you can raise your hand through, if you know how to do that, through the reactions menu on your Zoom menu, or even just turn your microphone on and or camera, and we'll see that too and be able to call in. So really open up for all of those topics and more. So I'll just be quiet and let y'all do that. Don't be shy. I know some of you have activities coming up that might be open to the public that you'd like to share or even share as an example. And any other questions or announcements? Of course, do look for the survey link that was just put in the chat again. Again, we will be putting the recordings of today's workshop onto the webpage where you registered at earthquakecountry.org/Bay Area, as well as the PDF of the presentations, and also a collection of the links that were provided. And Sandra, you want to talk about your San Mateo County Disaster Prep Day?
Yes, for those of you who may not have heard about it, and it's been obviously not taking place for the last couple of years, but it returns this year, Saturday, July 30th, the San Mateo County Disaster Prep Day. Free admission. There probably is a cost for parking, so a carpool, but at the events center or the fairgrounds in San Mateo. And it'll have emergency equipment, a helicopter from CAL FIRE, all kinds of fire engines and fire trucks for the kids to enjoy, and workshops for the parents on FireWise, Stop the Bleed, CPR, and preparedness. All kinds of vendors, all kinds of CERT programs. So please bring the family on Saturday, July 30th to the fairgrounds in San Mateo.
Sandra, is that open to people from other counties as well?
Everyone's welcome.
Great, great. Thank you. Who else has an example like that or activity you want to highlight? I'll even open up to what are you going to do differently for ShakeOut maybe this year than from what you've done before?
Well, just to follow along with Sandra, I was going to say that SFO Airport will also be at the San Mateo County Disaster Preparedness Fair. So we'll have our mobile command vehicle on display. So come on and see it. You'll see it's the best command vehicle of all.
That sounds like a reason to go, just that.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, Lars Eric put into the chat for ShakeOut this year, not be fully virtual. Yes, excellent. We do hope to have the in-person activities again. And we are looking at the city of Oakland has reached out early to perhaps have a big media event or multiple locations that day. So if you are interested in hosting an event for your drill to showcase your drill with the news media, definitely let us know. Email info@earthquakecountry.org. We have we also on the ShakeOut website, there's a form for submitting your events too. So, but just be in touch with us at this point so we can talk through what we can even bring and support your event in terms of materials and a shake simulator. We don't have one, but we work with the organizations that do, and we can help arrange that. Most of them do charge, some don't, but if you have any questions about mobile earthquake simulators, you can also email us. And Sandra has just put the link into the chat for the disaster prep day. Jen Grimm, you want to say a little bit about your evacuation town hall tomorrow?
Sure. So I wasn't quite sure if this qualified for this announcement, but anyway, we are holding a town hall. Oakland Fire Safe Council is holding a town hall, and we're going to talk about evacuation preparedness and planning, the zone haven system, and about knowing your zone. And so this is a program that a lot of people in Oakland are unaware of, the zone haven system and knowing your zone. So we're hoping to spread the word and get people signed up. And yeah, evacuation is kind of on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And it can also be an issue if it's not just a wildfire. It could be due to like a ruptured gas line or a chemical leak or something like that. So it's important to all residents of Oakland and beyond. So everyone is invited to attend. You don't have to be an Oaklander. Feel free to register. And the link is in the chat. Thank you very much.
Well, may I add something, Mark?
Yes.
So MPC Ready is about 2 years old, and we have a monthly community meeting, and it's aimed partly at skills building, but also connections. And so I met Jen Grime at a California Volunteers Help a Neighbor group. So we have a citywide organization, but this Help a Neighbor group is different people participate, such as people like myself or Jen. So that was great to get connected. And this Saturday, and I'm afraid I don't have a link ready to put in the chat because that's how my week has been. But anyway, we're hearing from I think it's really important that the governor recognizes that in a disaster, a major earthquake, people are going to see their neighbors first. The first responders, they're very unlikely to see them right away because there won't be enough. And so they're trying to strengthen the role of California's volunteers before, during, and after disasters. So he is a new person hired. He's going to speak to us, disaster support specialist. But the reason I highlight this, so groups like MPC Ready, we certainly want to work with our government. What we're doing is totally consistent with best practices, but sometimes it takes a while to get that official endorsement and support, usually years, like 8 or more years. We hope to get it a lot sooner, but I think it's important that people know that the government is pushing this, the governor, and this could have an implication for your group too if you work with volunteers. So I hope I'm explaining it. Okay, so Jen, thank you, Jen, for coming to my rescue. And I've already put Jen in touch with counterparts. So, anyway, the Saturday meeting is kind of a good networking meeting too.
And so that is strengthening the role of California's volunteers before, during, and after disasters with Zachary Corbo, Disaster Support Specialist, Cal Volunteers Officer of the Governor, as read from the Zoom link shared by Jen. Love the connection across the Bay, people working together and helping to raise awareness of all your activities. So let's keep this rolling. Any other examples or things to announce from anyone on the call? Okay. And any other questions based on today's call?
Mark, I think you mentioned earlier, great shakeout in October. I think here we are in May, so it's not too early to start thinking about that. What are you going to be doing registering for it? So this is a good opportunity. I'm sure we'll have another workshop between now and then, but just thinking about it, I think we should all start planning that.
Thanks, Jeff.
Are we ready to adjourn? Any other comments? Anyone else?
So we'll kind of hang out for a while too, even after this kind of final announcement here, kind of reminding you about where the workshop recording will be, earthquakecountry.org/Bay Area, the way to reach us, and specifically for Earthquake Country Alliance Bay Area. We do have a reminder, we do have a webpage in Spanish too. And on social media, make sure you're following us at twitter.com/ECA. And also on Facebook, you can look for Earthquake Country Alliance, the full thing, facebook.com/Earthquake Country Alliance. We've put the link into the survey many times. Please copy that or type it directly if you can't. And that really does help us. And so it is 2:30, the kind of like the formal part of the meeting will adjourn. Thank you, Jeff, for stepping in and helping to chair today's meeting, and for Sharon and the Mini Award presenters, and for Monica Stoffel and Rosinski and Josie and Nevitt and everybody who shared on today's call. Also to our ASL interpreters, Destiny and Lucia, thank you very much. And so that kind of ends the regular meeting, but we will stay on if you're just too shy to ask some questions and to share some things with a larger group. We'll be here for a few more minutes just to make sure that we can have open discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, Sharon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a good rest of the day and the week.
Thank you.
Safe.